I can tell you another, like, really horrific story of shit that happened to me where these sociopathic men just feel entitled to women's money. They just have no thought at all that there's anything wrong with taking our money and using it to hurt us. So I was in Mexico hiding out, basically, because my criminals, I think, are mostly here in the States, and law enforcement isn't protecting me or anyone. So I'm hiding out in Mexico and highly concerned that someone will be coming to find me and kill me and shut me the fuck up because I was keeping on writing about what had happened to me. And you really have to kill me to silence me. So, clearly I'm still alive. I don't know why. But maybe this story shed some light. So, at one point, this guy started stalking me in Mexico. And I called the Mexican police on him multiple times, and they did nothing. And he kept telling the police, he was Mexican, so he spoke fluent Spanish, and he was one of them, that I was his wife. Like, no. And eventually I just gave up, because I was all by myself, and terrified, and lonely as fuck, and isolated from my family, because I couldn't get a hold of them. And so he just basically captured me. He captured me, and he started using my money to live, because he didn't have any of his own. At that point, I still had a trickle of money coming in from previous investments. And he was scary. And he just didn't leave me alone. Like, he was always by my side. Like, he didn't want me going, out of his sight. Because I was basically a captive. And at one point, we were staying in Lo de Marcos, at a pretty nice place on the beach, and he assaulted me. He was drunk, and he was also an alcoholic. And he assaulted me, and at that point, I ran. I literally, ran out of our place and ran up the street and told people what was happening to me. And they called the police, and I told them what was happening, and they said I needed to file a restraining order. And then I went back to the place, and the police had kicked him out, thankfully. But he took all my stuff. And then apparently he had bribed the police to do that with my money. He took my truck. He took the vehicles. He stole all the vehicles. I had a truck, and I had a four-wheeler, which you kind of need to get around in Mexico. And he stole them. And then I fled. The owner there was a woman, and she understood the problem. And she helped me pack up all my stuff that day. And I went and hid out at another place in Lo de Marcos. And then I had enough money to hire a Mexican lawyer to try and put this motherfucker in jail. Right? And he helped me compile a massive file, a massive dossier with witness testimony, because this guy kept coming back to my last location and threatening everyone there if they didn't tell them where I was, and scary shit like that. And luckily none of them did, but they did. Some of them did go to the police and file a report, eyewitness report, on what they had seen him do to me and what he was continuing to do to kind of everybody. So I had this massive file I had compiled to try and put this motherfucking criminal in jail. And then in one of the places where I was hiding out, somehow or other, I'm not going to go into the whole story, he found me. He found out where I was, and he cornered me. I was living in sort of a kind of an Airbnb on the property of another criminal. And he cornered me, and he held me hostage for 2 days. He beat me up. He raped me. I had 2 dogs. He poisoned the dogs and took them away, and I never saw them again. And And he tried to kill me. He also, at that point, confessed that he had been sent by my predators in Maine. I guess thinking I'm going to be dead soon. And he put a gun in my mouth and he fired. Beat me up with the gun and all kinds of other things. He put the gun in my mouth and then he fired. And the gun just happened to jam. So I didn't get shot. Managed to escape right after that, and Mexican police came. I was all beaten up, took a report, managed to find my attorney, and he was appalled, like, because we went to the police, the Mexican police, and, like, they hadn't gotten the story straight at all, and they seemed to be on the side of my predator. Surprise, surprise. I called the the American consulate, and they just said, yeah, there's bad guys in Mexico. Yeah, there's bad guys in America. But there's bad guys in Mexico, and all we can tell you is get the fuck out. Come back home. So I did at that point, and more shit happened then. And later on, after not receiving any help from coming back home, again, I fled back to Mexico, and partly it's just because it's cheaper to live there, and at that point I was really running out of the last dregs of my money because it had all been stolen. And I went to look for that very thick file that we had compiled at the Office of the Women. There's there's an office just for women and I guess domestic violence in Mexico where I was, and near Puerto Vallarta. And the file had gone. It had disappeared. They couldn't find it anywhere. They saw that there was a file, and it had disappeared. And I couldn't find the lawyer that I had worked with. He also had disappeared. So the lawyer had disappeared, and my file had disappeared.